Hello and welcome back to the Christian Century YouTube channel. I'm John, joined today by one of our writers, Matt Thomas, who has written a new essay for us called The Louisiana Standard Version, which looks at the specific language choices of the Ten Commandments that are being posted in classrooms in certain US states based on new laws that are being passed. We're going to talk a lot about that. Before we dive in, remember to like this video, subscribe to us on YouTube, and with that out of the way, Matt, hello. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, hi, John. I'm Matt Thomas. I've been out here in California for the past 3 decades or so. Grew up in Ohio, rural Ohio, so that was a shift coming out here. But let's see, my wife and I have 4 kids, varying ages. She's actually doing PhD in English composition, applied linguistics, but I mostly teach at Fuller Seminary out here, doing Old Testament, Hebrew language, and pretty much whatever else they throw at me, and pastor a very small church.
Awesome. Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, in this essay, you start by describing, I didn't know anything about the specific language that is
Mhm.
appearing in these classroom walls. I would have guessed it came from the King James or some other
Yeah.
known translation, but you were able to discover that the language is actually based on a monument put together decades ago by
Hmm.
the Fraternal Order of Eagles. And it seems like in
Yes.
your essay, it's just a real mystery how they came up with the specific wording that they did for the commandments. I'm curious if you could tell us more about your research. How did you try to discover where this language came from and what did that look like?
Yeah, it was I had the same kind of assumption coming into it. When I took a look at the law, I looked at the Louisiana one first, which is why I called it Louisiana Standard Version, but it had the specific wording, which kind of struck me as interesting. And it sounded like you said, it sounded like King James. But then when I checked it, I'm like, well, this is not the King James. There are some, fairly nothing major differences, but there were definitely some wording differences. So I started checking back, and I know in the article, I think I said I checked over a dozen translations. I kind of just excluded more modern ones because it was clearly not based on a lot of those. So I could say, I looked at dozens of translations in some way, but I have access to a lot of Bible translations, I guess as you might imagine, as a scholar, but I was not able to find anything that paralleled. And this is something I don't think I've even mentioned to anybody at the magazine, but I went back and watched the scene on the mountain in the Ten Commandments movie to go and check and see, and it's not what's in there either. So eventually, I found that the text traced back to this monument on the Texas state grounds, and there was a Supreme Court case was decided back in 2005, Van Orden v. Perry, where the dispute was over that specific monument. And the Supreme Court found in that case that the it had enough of a kind of, I guess, kind of secular purpose in like history of law, that kind of thing, that they allowed it, which I'm guessing is why the Louisiana and then subsequently the other states have picked up that specific wording.
So even though it's not the same as the King James, it
Hmm.
seems to be somewhat patterned after it. At least it shares the same kind of archaic wording.
Yeah.
Thou shalt do this or that. You noted in the essay that this really dated language, putting this on the wall of a
Mhm.
modern classroom for children, is, you called it, an odd pedagogical choice. And I agree, quite odd.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, like, given how clearly odd that is, why do
Mhm.
you think that they're using this kind of dated, archaic language in these classroom walls?
Yeah. If you really wanted it to have this, purpose of teaching and edifying the youth or whatever, it just doesn't make a lot of sense because the language is so language has changed and language morphs over time. But one piece of it, I think, is that it goes back to that monument in on the Texas state grounds. But where that text comes from is uh, I don't know. There's no way I've literally not been able to find a single uh, trail to figure out where that came from. But my guess is that, particularly given that this is in the South and there's a lot of reverence for the King James Version, that something that sounds like that I think probably just appealed to a lot of folks. And I suspect that the, state lawmakers weren't thinking necessarily specifically how this would play in a classroom.
Yeah. It's funny that you're kind of mentioning sort of a cynical explanation, which is that, well, we'd even like to use more modern language, but we have this court case precedent only about the language on this one monument, and that's what's going to let us win in court. Therefore, we have this old, dated language everywhere in these classrooms. That's kind of a sad and funny way to think about it. Thirdly, I mean, the main thing I wanted to ask you about, I
Mhm.
think, is the heart of the essay, which is about what is and isn't present in this particular version of the Ten Commandments. And you
Right.
provided there's a really nice side by side. Anyone who hasn't read the
Mhm.
essay yet, check it out at the link below. It's a side by side of the Louisiana version, uh,
Mhm.
and then the King James of the two different Bible passages that give the Ten Commandments. And you notice some of the differences. And one of the biggest differences is in the Sabbath commandment. There's a lot of content missing in the classroom version.
Right.
And you observed some of what that might mean related to
Mhm.
justice. I wondered if you could tell us a little more about what's missing from that commandment and why that might matter.
There were a couple primary things that I saw missing there. And this is something I've come to over years of teaching, because I ended up teaching on that passage in Exodus or in Deuteronomy, reasonably often. And something I've come to realize over the years is how much justice is really interwoven into that commandment. Because you have the reference to the various groups that should rest, and it includes children and immigrants and enslaved people. In Exodus, it just kind of says that, and that's who should rest. Um, and then there's that interesting piece, which I include the essay about who the you there is, which I argue is referring to a male wealthy Israelite. And I got started down that path actually by an article by Talia Brenner on who am I an addressee? I think it's called. She's looking mainly she was looking at the gender language, but I also looked at class and the ways that wealth played into that, um, and then when you put all those things together, and especially in the Deuteronomy version, then when it says, "So that your male and female enslaved persons may rest as you do," and then it grounds it in the Exodus. There's just a lot of really rich background behind the idea of Sabbath and what it means to take that break. Um, I actually came across a quote by Brueggemann a while back that was uh, I'm not going to remember it exactly, but it's basically Sabbath is kind of a break from the uh, productivity cycle that we get in society. So
Yeah, thank you. Well, so much I'm sure to say about these laws, and you mentioned even in the essay, there are many, many reasons to not post these commandments, but not the focus of this essay though, which was this just fascinating look at the language. Thanks so much for chatting about this, Matt. Really appreciate it. Again, anyone who missed this essay, please check it out at the link in the video description below. Matt, good to talk to you. Good to meet you. Thanks for being here.
yeah, thank you. It was great to meet you and hey to all you out there.